Hello, I'm Couch Potato Chan, and today we're gonna try to make food items from Genshin out of a bunch of things I found at Dollar Tree. Let me take out what I have. We're not switching the angle because I'm too lazy.
My original plan was to make lettuce out of this ball and felt because I saw this really cool My Cabbage's cosplay from the last airbender at Fanime.
I thought it was a really cool idea. He made them this way so that he could decompress them, and they were travel friendly. So I thought that was super cool, so I'm gonna try it.
Spoiler alert, I failed, so I had to use a different method.
But the plan so far is cabbages, potatoes, radishes maybe, mushrooms. The seasoning that they usually have. They have salt and pepper. Cheese? I think I saw cheese. I don't remember cheese being in the game. Maybe I just don't get it that often, but cheese, some of the flowers, carrots, meat. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out, and whatever I like, that's what I'm gonna end up using. I'm gonna try to use as much stuff or junk from around my house or pieces from previous projects that I have to try to keep this as low cost as possible. So yeah, let's see how it turned out.
For all of these foods, I looked up images as references. I also worked on multiple items at a time, so you may see foods at various stages in the background due to editing. Let's start with the mushrooms. I cut this ball in two to make the top of the mushroom, and a pool noodle to do the stem. I cut the length I wanted, I eyeballed it. I shaped them with a box cutter, and for any rough edges, I used scissors to smooth them out. Now I need a smooth surface to paint, so I covered the shaped stem with some 2mm foam. Hot gluing carefully as it melts the pool noodle when you use too much. It helps to do it in sections, and to glue the foam to itself instead of the pool noodle. You do have to hold it together until it cools. I also found out you get a better finish if you leave extra material to cut away after you glue. To glue the top and the bottom of the mushroom together securely and for a cleaner finish, I added foam to the edges. For the top of the mushroom, I used felt for texture, but I think 2mm foam would have worked better. Regardless, it worked out okay. So I spray painted the tops to have a base before painting more details. I used my reference image throughout. Choosing colors and painting it is always a trust the process method for me.
I have a lot of yellows. We're gonna see which one gives me the right shade. Usually I just kind of experiment until I get the right shade. I just have to stare at the picture and try to figure it out. We'll see.
This process is sometimes quick, but most of the time long.
It's like this looks like the very top of it.
I usually start with the lightest shade and build upon it. I'll show a little bit of that right here. For blending, I tried sponge and different brushes. While those dried, I painted the stem in the same way. When dry, I glued those together. Although I should have painted the bottom first. Regardless, I did that last. Next, let's talk about cheese. Who cut the cheese? If you got that reference, you're old. Cheese was the easiest one. You just cut a triangle and done. Yay, you have cheese. Next is carrot. I started with this toy lightsaber. I cut off what I didn't need. And some pool noodle that I then carrot shaped. Wait, what? I wrote this. I'm so smart. I shaped the noodle poodle like a carrot with my box cutter and stuck the lightsaber inside the carrot. Because it worked for me before, I used scissors to smooth it out, plug the hole, and cover the whole thing with air dry foam. Was there an easier way to do this? Probably, but don't question me, I know what I'm doing. I smoothed out the air dry foam as much as I could and set that aside to start drying. The key is to work on it before it's fully dry, but not too early. I picked this trick up some time ago from another cosplayer online. I really wish I remembered who so I could credit them. Here are some of the things I have picked up while using this method. Use only enough water to wet your fingers and add as needed. If the air dry clay piece you are working on begins to get gooey, let it dry longer. Be patient and slowly work out the bumps. You also may need to work in sections. Air dry clay is best used for pieces that don't need to be perfect, like a carrot, but you could always sand it. Once it's fully dry, we paint in sections and add details. Finally, with a piece of green craft foam, I cut some rectangles, shaped and heat sealed them, then painted them the right shade and finished by gluing them to the rest of the carrot. Next is salt and pepper. I used Mod Podge and a brush to spread it around the bottom. For this first attempt, I used white sand. It was way too heavy and it did not stick to the sides well, so for my next attempt, I used real salt. Disclaimer on using real food items.
I wouldn't recommend anybody actually do this. I don't know if this is a good or terrible idea. I imagine don't keep these around for too long because it's actual food in there. I don't know. Honestly, don't keep this around for too long. I wouldn't risk it. Yeah. If anything, don't do this. If you can find something better than what I did, that's probably a way better idea. But since Fanime is coming up, we're gonna try to do this in a fast way. Oh my god, there's paint on the table.
Pepper was the same Mod Podge and brush method. I added pepper, then spinned it and shaked it to get it all over the sides. I let that dry, then I worked on making it look full but without adding too much weight. So I shaped some foam into a tiny mountain, testing if it would fit as I shaped it. I then painted the foam in a shade of brown, let that dry and added Mod Podge, covered that in pepper and let it dry, leaving me with this. As you can see, to place it inside, I had to fold it and carefully place it where I wanted it to stay. Same with the salt. Although I made the little mountain too small, so I improvised. Lastly, I used a Sharpie to draw on holes. And we're done! We can season Paimon now. Next is raw meat. As you can see, the foam is textured, so I smoothed it out with some sanding paper and a piece of wood, and freehanded the shape of the meat onto the foam, cutting it with a butts cutter, failing because I'm bad at it. So to fix my bad work, I sanded the edges, sealed with heat, primed with some layers of plasti dip, many layers of white acrylic later. I sketched and painted the details, and considering I plan to lay it flat, I only painted one side. Next is a pinecone. I didn't know these were edible. I drew and cut a bunch of what looked like dragon scales into 2mm EVA foam, then hot glued them onto a foam ball. Once the ball was fully covered, I filled the gap with some leftover pool noodle and made a small stem out of air dry clay, spray painted and let dry, then painted over it and added details with acrylic paint. Now let's talk about potatoes. They're yummy, they're tasty, they're potatoes. End of discussion. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. For my first attempt, I cut one of the foam balls and made it potato shaped, covered it in air dry foam and shaped it. But I didn't like how small it was in comparison to the other foods, so I started over. Second time around, I used scrap foam pieces. The idea was to have a big rectangle to carve out the potato with scissors. I could not make it as smooth as I liked, so I covered it in air dry foam. That's my go-to for surfaces that are not flat. This gave me a better surface to paint a more potato-y look. I let that dry for a couple of days, turning it occasionally so all sides dried, then back to finding the right shades and painting. Last, let's talk about the item that was one of the hardest, but I was the most proud of. Cabbage. The idea was to use a small ball in green felt, drawing leaves, cutting them and hot gluing them onto the ball. I did that a bunch of times, and I hated it. I thought if I painted it and added more dimension, maybe I would like it more. Nope. It just didn't look good with the rest of the foods. So I did the whole thing again, but with 2mm craft foam this time. The only difference was that I used heat to shape it a bit. To be honest, I didn't film it thinking it would be another failure and I could just learn from it. But it turns out I was wrong. I really liked it. So here's the results. I added them on with Velcro in case I wanted to move them around or pretend to eat them. I also wanted a picture with people seasoning Paimon. Results. Yes, Paimon looks delicious. RIP foods that did not make it into the pot.